How's it going, everyone? Alex here, getting ready to do a tutorial for how to make a Celeste platformer in Gdevelop 5. Now, um, I'm going to be cutting this video, this live stream, into multiple parts, and the first video that I'll be releasing will be an overview on how to set up your Gdevelop stuff. But until then, because it's not a huge deal, we're going to just kind of jump into the project and save those special video content for those videos. I won't be worrying too much about the voiceover or anything like that. So we're just gonna sit here and I'm gonna work through it, and then I'll start shooting them into shorts. So the first video will be about how to set it up in Gdevelop, and then at least starting your first project and getting all the tools that we need installed. We're going to be using LDTK and Gdevelop, as well as I use Pixel Edit, but you could use a sprite or anything like that. So, all right, let me just get my scene set up here. Make sure I should have done that before I got started, but you know how it goes. Especially with me, I've got attention deficit issues, so I'm not always paying the most attention. All right. What do I need? There we are. In this particular system, we're going to be working on a on a finite state machine. We're going to be setting it up using a finite state machine, and working towards getting all of our bits in order here. So, the tile set that you see as well today will be available on itch relatively soon. So I'm hoping by the release of my second video, I'll have the rudimentary version of the tile set available on itch. For those that are interested, I'll have a kind of a free mock-up version, and then I'll have a paid version. I would like to do this just a pay at what you would like, so maybe I'll just morph those together and run a campaign through itch. So if you can't support the channel, that's totally fine. If you can and you're interested in those assets, you'll be able to get them right off of itch. Otherwise, at the end of all of this, I'm going to compile it and put it into a project folder, template, and probably release it on the Gdevelop store as well. So anyways, with that little bit of information out of the way, let's get situated here to get rolling. I just need to open up some scene, and we'll go from there. My game broke. My Gdevelop. Let's see, Gdevelop. How's it going? What's up, Pico? You don't know why? I don't know why either. Hopefully, hopefully we'll find out together. All right, let's get switched over to the game scene and we'll get started. I'm going to be doing it in the browser today just to show everyone how it's done. You could do it this way if you wanted to. Let's switch over to the... There we go. Okay, so this is the tile set that we're going to be using. I designed this. I'll be working on it off stream usually to finish up everything, but this is the basic tile set that we're going to be using. So let's see here. This is the lore tile set. Let me close that down. We don't need to save anything there. This is also for the folklore. Have you ever played Celeste? If not, it's a typical platformer with it's not a Metroidvania, so there are no monsters and there's no ability to attack. It's just a platformer in the traditional sense. Celeste being the keyword for the YouTube algorithm. Okay, so um, here's just a mock-up scene that I did in our canvas. Our game canvas is going to be 320 by 184, and so when I'm going to be developing in the browser. So let's create a project, and we're going to do a custom resolution, and we're going to do 320 by 180. And let's see, we're going to call this lore. That's our project lore. And we're going to optimize for pixel art, and we don't need anybody to follow us. Jeez. Holy cow. Okay, Alex. Turn on your brain. All right. So with setting the canvas to this size, we're able to obtain the sort of Celeste, as you're platforming, you move between these. Each canvas is its own singular map. So that should be pretty interesting and easy for us to start developing that. The camera just sort of tweens every time we move to a... Celeste? Eh. All the same to me. uh, yeah, because it's like a mountain. Actually, the funny thing is, I have never played the game. I've only seen it played, but I know how how a platformer is. Uh, so yeah, interesting stuff. So here we go. Now that we have our base canvas set up, we're gonna want to start by let's go about this with renaming our game scene our scene to game scene. So we'll start there, and then we're gonna want to get started with some very basic rudimentary code. So I'm gonna start this the same way I start pretty much all of my projects, and that's with a simple debugger. So we're going to create a debug group because we're going to hide this later on. And we can create a text. Let's see. We're going to start with a proper bitmap text. Let's see. Do I want to do a bitmap text? Or do I just want to do a text yield? For the debugger text, we're just going to do a regular text yield. And we're going to name this debug text. The initial value, we don't need anything. Actually, did I just make this oops, that's the wrong one. Don't do that. You want to make that not input text, just regular text. There we are. And we're going to call that debug text. Don't do what I just did. We're going to upload from our device, and what I want to do is upload from my storage. I have a font that I really enjoy, and I've been using it in all of the other live streams, so let's be consistent here. Where do you put it, Alex? There it is. And we can just put that as text for now and hit apply, and we can drag this onto our game scene. Because we're going to be automatically working with, we can create a UI layer by going to the add layer, so on and so forth. And then we can change this position back to the UI layer. And so now, in case we do anything with the base layer, do any sort of modification to the camera, the text will always remain where it needs to be. So we can just run this now, and the only thing that's going to be there is a blank thing that says text. That's super blurry. So I'm going to decide right away, we're going to fix that. We're going to do this as a bitmap text just to make it super clean. And we're going to call this debug text, all the same. We're going to upload that font again. And all of this will be included in the asset pack. UI. No. Tiles. What did I do with it? Come on, Alex. All right. Let me fix this. I think it's called Snow. This will be included in that video that I was talking about at snowbee.org. So let me move this back over. So Snowbee is a bitmap font generator. So we can add a font file. We can add the font that we were just using. And we can kind of spice it up a little bit. Maybe we want to add a stroke on the outside so we can make the font white and then do a black stroke. And we could do maybe 4. I like that. I guess that none of that really matters. The default font size is 72. That's plenty big enough. We probably don't even need that. We could do like 68. That's better. And then we can export this. So we're going to export this as the FNT. We're going to name the file bitmap filia. Okay, so let me just move all this stuff over. And what we can do, let's see, back in our project here, I'm gonna export that zip file into the base folder for our project. So I'm gonna make a new folder. You guys can't see this. I'm gonna show you here. You can, let's rename this to, actually we have a YouTube folder already. YouTube, for me, we'll call it lore. And then in here, we'll create a new one and call it font. And we're just going to drag and drop our font into here. And so what it is it's going to generate that PNG, which is the atlas for the font text, and then it made a new font file. So all we need to do is, so inside of this now we have a font, and then we have an atlas. And so we can open our, can we not do that? Thank you. We can open that, show all files, and go back to our YouTube section over here. Go into lore, font, and select that atlas. And then you're just gonna do the same thing for that font file. And there it is. So now that we have that uploaded, we can then drag and drop that. And it's humongous in the font. So we're gonna change that down to a 0.25 on the text scale. I could have set it to the appropriate text size for our game, but it's kind of easier to make it bigger and then just shrink it. So there's the debug text, and this is going to be important because we're going to be doing a lot of changes to our player state and things like that. So we're just going to need that. So what I want to do at the very beginning is just start roughing out the foundations of our project. Now, I know what we're going to be doing. And so I have my own workflow here. And so as I know it's coming, it's hard to show you without showing you like my flow chart and showing you my process. So instead, I'm going to simplify it as best I can so it's easy to follow along. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a group. Now, I use groups for everything. So as you're building this project or any project in Gdevelop, what I like to do as part of my workflow is create groups for all of the things I'm going to be doing. So we can create hey, Xtel, thanks for joining us. We can create we're going to call this initialize game, and that's going to be our first category. We're going to want camera settings as a category, maybe player events, just to keep organized. We're going to want dialogue. We're going to have some talking in our game. We're going to have our debug events group. And then maybe we have some other stuff. Right now, I'm not exactly sure we're not going to have enemies, so we don't need to worry about that. That should be good for now. Under initialize game, shift D to create a new event. Inside of that event, we're going to create an at the beginning of the scene. So when we begin our game, we want to do this first. Hey Carlos, I do. That one is coming out as well. You can go back and watch some of my previous videos. That's called Folklore, and I have I will be making a tutorial on that. But I do have a project for that. So if you're interested, drop that sub. But I do, if you join our Discord, it's easier for me to share that information. We kind of have that stuff on there. So it's easier if you do that. But yes, there will be a tutorial. Right now, I'm mass producing. I'm going to be working on releasing all those things. So, yeah, hang out. If you're interested in that zombie survivor top down sort of game. All right. Thanks, Carlos. So at the beginning of the scene is what we were trying to do. So at the beginning of the scene, I like to hide the debug group. Hide and then debug text. Nope, sorry, debug group. And this is just so at the beginning of the scene, this will be hidden as long as we attach it to the group object. So in Gdevelop, we can't assign special properties or behaviors to scene groups, but they do inherit from their child. So if we were to create special behaviors or variables in the object of debug, we could pass that along and say, we can call the variable attached to that group, and it would do it for all the objects that are attached to it. And that's kind of interesting because in other systems, we could, the typical way that we would want to do this is create some sort of parent and assign everything to the parent. But Gdevelop's a little bit different, and that's just one of the small differences in programming that might catch you up. So now that we have a debug text and a debug group, at the beginning of the scene, we're going to load something. So what I want to do is start preparing for our game. And what I like to do is go to our global variables and begin with a structure. Now, a structure is like an array where we start, we have a list of objects that are, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in programming, we always start with 0. So 0 to 1. So 0 is the first entry point on an array. And a structure is much the same. However, it functions more like, if you are familiar with the term, a dictionary, where you can store these objects and call them. You can still call them as an array, so you can still call 0, but it allows you to create a structure that has strings and other variables in them that you just you call directly from that setup. So what we're going to do is call it game state, and game state is game state dot whatever we want to do. So game state dot checkpoint is one of the things that I like to do, and I like making that into a number. And we're going to start that at 0. And so what we can say is at the beginning of the scene, if we have if we are at a certain checkpoint, we can load in some backlogged information. Now we could load in a player's save file or something like that, but for now we're gonna work with a little bit of kind of like you would for like a Metroidvania, where you might have a sword that you unlock or a dash move. We're going to from this point, so we're going to check to see if the global variable, so global variable, it's a number variable of game state checkpoint, is equal to 1. If we are at the first checkpoint, we would want to unlock something, and this is just like, imagine this is a quick unlock settings. So we can set this that way we can fast test and prototype things. So we're just going to set a checkpoint, and then we're just going to copy an event, an empty event, and paste it in here and rename it to, we can call it quick unlock settings. And honestly, we could put it up here and do that. So now I'm going to create a comment, and we can edit our comment up here. How did I do that? Oh, I think it's just right click edit. There we go. And we're gonna just change this to red, and we're gonna say changing these settings, or change these settings to spawn with items. All right. So this is just a note so that we know what we can do here. Now, all we'd have to do is underneath this, set a Boolean. So one of the things that we're going to have in our game, so underneath here, we can add to a structure, we can add another structure, and we can call this player skills, unlocks, whatever you want to do. So unlocks is what we're going to call it, or unlock. And we're going to add another, we're going to add a Boolean, and we're going to call this dash. Maybe the first move we learn how to do is a dash, and that'll be a Boolean value. We're going to set it to false. So if we're at checkpoint number 1, we'll always have the dash move. So we're going to go to global. We want that to be a global Boolean variable, and we're going to click on GameState.unlock dash. Now, we could create this function right here, this variable change action is what they call it in Gdevelop. We can change that here and have never defined this, but we'd have to handwrite it, and it would throw us an error. It would be like there'd be a squiggle line if we hadn't have added it to our global variables. This is called defining, this practice. We're defining our states, or in this case, our variables and Booleans and functions and everything. So we're defining that here, or declaring it. And so we could declare this just like this without having to do that, but we wouldn't have been able to have the cool drop-down menu functions. So it's better if you do define. It is less prone to error and things like that. So anyways, now what we want to do is begin our player functions, our player development. So let's take a look here and begin. So normally in Celeste, or in this style of platformer, there is, each room is standalone. So there isn't usually much going on in these rooms. For the most part, we don't ever like leave the bounds of those rooms. Sometimes we go up a little bit farther and there are bigger rooms, but for the most part, unless they're a transfer room, each individual room is kind of its own puzzle. And so we would normally in most games center the camera on the player, but because we're not going to be doing that in this game, we're going to be kind of moving room tile to room tile or transitioning, lerping between those things. We're going to, that'll be a later part in the tutorial on how to navigate the camera. So for now, we know that that will be there. So we can just kind of let that exist. The most important thing that we begin on really is the player events. So let's start with our player event. Let's see here. We're going to want to create, so in Gdevelop, when we go up here to the project manager, and while we're looking at the project manager, we have scenes, extensions, external events, and layouts, right? And extensions are these handy community and Gdevelop backend features. So they're basically a library, some an extension of the game that's been compiled into, so like using the same events that we're currently doing, they've been compiled into functional tools that we can use in our game. And one of the things that we're going to want to do is have controller support. So we could add that now, but we're going to do that in just a moment. So I just wanted to show you what extensions are. And then we have external events, which are code pages without a game scene. So when we create a game scene, we create both a scene and an event sheet for that scene. Now, if we create an external event, it's a standalone page. And so that way we avoid spaghetti scripts where everything is jammed into one file. We don't need to do that. And also it's a good practice when you're building finite state machines. So the next thing is external layout. External layouts are functional canvases, just like this, without an event sheet tied to them. Pretty straightforward. So we're going to call in the player's event a external link, and we're going to call it player finite state machine, or FSM. And we don't have that yet, so we are going to create that event now, and we're going to call it player finite state machine. And now what that's done is when we click on the script, it'll pull up our new script. Now we want to configure it so we know where this script is linked to, how it corresponds with the back end of Gdevelop, and how it gets called into the scene. We're going to call it via game scene. And now every time the game scene runs, this event sheet, as we're going down here, we're going to include anything that's in this. And this is where all the magic happens for our player. So we want to utilize that initial state that we had developed originally for Scott. Oh, I choked on air. Give me a second. Gotta drink some water here before I die. We created the debugger script, and now it's time for us to finally put that to function. So what we're going to do is we're going to add our player to the scene so that we can start giving them some game logic. Now, I haven't exported the player yet, so we're gonna do that together, so you can kind of see what that process might look like. In the beginning, I already have some animation set for the player. We have an idle animation, a run animation, a jump animation, and then some climbing and player death stuff. This will be expanded a little bit in the future, but for now, this is how we're gonna do that. I really like the stylization of adding a white outline to the player. And so I think what we're going to do is we're going to do that in the engine. So we could do it in the sprite sheet, but some people might not want the outline. So I'm going to show you how to do it in the engine, and then we can go from there. So we're going to take I already have it animated here in the idle. So we have the idle spreadsheet. Now, some of you might be used to a sprite, and they would be in layers on top of each other. and some animation softwares do it that way. In this case, I have frames, and we're doing it kind of vertically, a traditional sprite sheet, if you will. And so we're just going to we're going to file, export our animation. We're going to export at a scale of 1. We're going to collect the idle animation. Let's go back to our YouTube lore, and we're going to create we're going to call it sprites, or sprite. We rename this to sprites. And we're going to create a folder for the player. And inside of that, we're going to call it lore idle or player idle. All right. And we're just going to save that. So it's going to save each frame. I'm going to make sure I select the right one. I got to go backwards now. There we go. Lore idle, player idle, doesn't really matter. Save that. And we'll get all 4 of the frames were exported. So now we can go into Gdevelop. Oops. I'm using Gdevelop in the browser, so let me close those down. There we go. We're going to add a new object, sprite, and we're going to call it player. Import the image, show the files. I'm using Opera GX, so if you're not familiar with my browser, that's what's going on there. But we're just running Gdevelop in the browser. Sprites, player, and now we have the idle. Oh yeah, I forgot that I did that. Oh well, I'll rename those later. It doesn't really matter. For the sprite, when I upload these to itch, they'll be all cleaned up, and we're just going to name this one idle. So we have a default player animation that is idle. We don't need to add the player to the scene unless we're going to not create them via scripts. So I guess for now, for sampling purposes, we can add the player. And we can see that the player is roughly 10% of the game scene. I'm going to create a grid. And so we can go over here to this grid tool, click on that, show the grid. And right now it's at a 32 by 32 grid, which is much too big for our game. Actually, all of the tiles in our game are actually 8 by 8, and the player's on a 32 by 32 canvas. However, they're only 16 pixels big. So what we want to do is go to our player and just set them kind of gently in our scene for now. And to test our gameplay, we're going to need a collision object. We can call this collision mask. We're going to create this with Pescal, or whatever it's called. Yeah, I know Opera is not supported. It works fine still. We're going to resize the canvas to, we'll call it 8 by 8. We're going to maintain that and resize. And then all we're going to do is create a little box and color it red. And this is just our little box letting us know that, why is that? There we go. Let's see, can I get that? There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just do a little box shape, something to let us know that there's a collision box or what have you. And honestly, I should have done this as a scalable sprite. That was my own fault. I shouldn't have done that, but that's okay. So now, because what's going to happen is I'm going to stretch this. It looks kind of ugly. What you could do, and what I should have done, is go to a tiled sprite and do the same thing. So now a tiled sprite is going to, we're just going to call this one collision because we can't have 2 objects doing the same thing. We're going to do the same thing we just did in, actually, I think we can choose it. Is it the new sprite? Yeah, that's fine. There we go. And so what this allows us to do is when we stretch it, it creates another box rather than this. So we just delete that collision mask, and now we have a collision shape that is scalable. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add the extensions. So this is where we sort of begin using some of the pre-built functions in Gdevelop and those extension tools to build the foundation to our game. And so what we're going to do is go to our player, go to the behavior, add a behavior, and add the platform character behavior. Now, this will default to the default settings, so it's a little loose. and you have to use the arrow keys and the space key. So for now, I'll show you what that looks like. Hello, there it is. All right, our player fell right through the map. You didn't see it, it was a big white square, but he fell right through the map because the collision doesn't have the behavior of platform. And now we're going to turn off ledge grabbing because we can't ledge grab in this one. And this is specifically the top corner. We will be doing wall grabbing later. And we can change, if we wanted to, this to a jump through platform. So those ones that are like bridges that you can jump on top of and then fall through, and then ladders. But this is a platform. So we're just going to have that as it is. Run the preview. And now when we press the arrow keys and jump, we have movement. Whoop! And our player fell off because there's no blocking on the edge of that. So if we wanted to stop that from happening, we can add another collision and just pull it all the way down. And that way our player doesn't fall off the edge of the world while we're doing this practice. So yeah, that's really fast. And one of the things that we're going to address pretty like now actually is the player controls. So what we want to do is go into our player, and to begin this process, we need to add a variable to our object. So in our player object, we're going to add a variable called player. We could call it player state or player finite state, finite state machine. We're going to call it player state, and we're going to turn this into a string, and we're going to call it init state, the initialize state. So we could set it to idle and have our player immediately go to idle, but this allows us to use our debugger script kind of right away and let us check what our player's current state is. One of the other things that we might want to do in our game is add a direction, left and right. And that way we can take into consideration which way we're facing, and maybe doing flips or testing the direction for other reasons. So for now, we're going to add direction. And that's also going to be a string, and this will start at blank or null, and that'll be fine. But we could do, this is init direction. Doesn't really matter. Be consistent, I suppose. So now that we have those two things built, what we want to do is initialize our player. So in our player finite state machine, we want to initialize. So let's do the same thing. We build a habit of building these event groups. We might need a few of them, so let's copy a few out. We're going to call this one player and that's weird English. Initialize player. Shift D, and we're going to do an at the beginning of the scene. Oop. At the beginning of the scene. Now, I could put it here. Well, in this case, I can't. Normally, you would build your actions right off of this. I always like to drop them down one for organization purposes, but that's really it. However, when we initialize a new script, it does become a child, its own. Oh, I got hiccups. Its own event, and so we're going to call this one player finite state machine initialize init, right? And we don't have that. We can't click on this. There's nowhere for us to go, so we have to go into here and create, following the same name conventions, player finite state machine init. And this, we're specifically, again, using finite state machines to build the structure of our game. So while doing that, we need to go to the player finite machine initializer. Geez, I can speak today, I promise. And oh my goodness. Man, today I'm having a moment. Because we're building a finite state machine, we're kind of branching off of to all these different files to create a really organized system. For some people, you're used to just coding right into the script. I think that this is a really, honestly, a better way of scripting, and a way of keeping all your code organized. So that's my opinion. You do you. So now we get to the very basic backbones of how a finite state machine works. I have a video kind of more in depth explaining that, or well, I'll have a standalone video. I have a live stream where I go into detail about that, but I will be making it a video. And so if I've done that and you're watching the video that I'm doing now, it'll be on the screen. If not, because you're watching the live stream, the unedited version now, there is none. So deal with it. Anyways, we're going to go to the initialize, and we're going to start at the beginning. Now, for every event, when our player transfers into a state, so rather than controlling the player by if they're touching the ground and trying to jam all of our code into one little like script, we're pulling it out. And now for every state our player is in, we have actions and we have transitions. Actions are everything our player can do in that state, and transitions are how we move out of that state. And we have to duplicate this for every script, but it's really copy and paste. So when we initialize our player, each state will have varying own actions and transitions, but they will all have actions and transitions. So we will go into our little handy dandy right click and go into event group. We're going to call this actions, and we want to call this one transitions. Okay, so we have in our actions, we're going to trigger this one time. So when this script is being called, we're going to trigger this once, and we're going to change our players. This is a variable, and this is a text variable. We're changing our player state into the set or the initial state in its state, just like it is, just as it currently is. So we're not really changing anything, but for some reason, if it wasn't, we're going to set the player's state to initialize, and then we're going to transition. So in the initialize step, we can just add this step in to make sure that our player doesn't break, or that we're properly initializing when we begin our scene. And this is I always include this in all of my videos because I like to show you the basics of how finite state machines work before we get into the more complex stuff. So when we begin our game, like, we're going to start with falling. So in the beginning of our game, if our player is falling, once they like touch the ground, initialize. Well, we don't have the fancy script in place yet, but for now, we're just going to call this transitioning into, we can call it idle. What happened here? Transition. Okay, there we go. And we'll call this idle for now, but later on we'll probably do a transition where, because that way we can put our player above the ground, they fall, they touch the ground, and they initialize. And we're just going to trigger this once. So we're going to then do the same thing we just did and change the state into idle. So at the beginning of our game, our player is going to be set to the initialized state, and then we're going to transition into idle. Now we could check the value here and be double thorough and say if the variable is initialized state and transfer, but we don't need to do that. So now that we have our player initialized, we can go back to our player's finite state machine and then begin developing all of our transitions, all of our main states. So one of the things that we're gonna have cutscenes in our game. So we want to make a cutscene variable or a cutscene group, and then we can say not in cutscene. And what this does is it lets us set new controls for our player. So when we're in the cutscene, eliminate our player's controls, and when we're not in the cutscene, allow ourselves to move again. And so we're just going to add another external event we're going to add that here, and we're going to check the global. And now I'm going to show you that we can add this variable. We're going to do global variable, and we're going to call it cutscene, and we're going to call it actually game state dot cutscene. See, it isn't there, and we're going to say 1. And this is a valid call, no squiggle, but we haven't declared it. So if we wanted it to be nice and pretty and consistent with everything else we've done, we should add that variable in. And so checkpoint, or under checkpoint, we'll call it cutscene, and this will be a number. Now, you could do a Boolean, but we're going to have different cutscenes in the game, and it works if we set each cutscene to its own value later on. So for now, though, we're just going to say, is it or is it not in a cutscene? And the 1 or the 0 value will be not in a cutscene, and then the 1 value being true. So for now, we can copy this into our cutscene, not in a cutscene, and change this to 0. And so now when we are not in our cutscene, we can add all of our player events. So we're going to add our group, and this will be the player, let's see, player states. And we're going to do this again, copy player states, drag it underneath. And the first one, what we're going to do is idle. So we'll do one for idle. In our game state, I know that we're going to have idle, we're going to have move, we're going to have jump. That's going to be a state. We're going to have falling is a state. We're going to have move. Let's go idle, move, jump, fall, dash. And then we'll do, let's see, dash and climb. So these are all the different abilities our player is going to have, if you will. And let's see, jump, we'll do dash, we'll do jump, falling, dash, and climbing in order. So now what we want to do is for each one of these, we have to check a variable, and it needs to be much like it was in the player initializer. We need to check now if we're in this state. So to do that, we go on the add condition. We're going to go to the player object, and we're going to check the variable, and it's a text variable. And again, we're going to check the state. If the state is equal to idle, which it would be after we initialize, set our player event. So we're just going to copy this blank one up here. We're going to paste it and move it in, and we're going to call this one player finite state machine idle. We're going to keep going through this process of reiteration on these. So player finite state machine idle. Now we can go into our idle script, set it to function on the game scene, and now we're into our idle. So just like in our initialize, we can copy the actions and the transitions and just kind of paste them into here, because this will always remain to be true. And in our actions, we want to make sure that our player is doing what they're supposed to be doing. So when we launch this, since we have no unlocks, like there's no sword animation, our player isn't able to attack, we don't need to worry about all of those things. What we can do instead is check to see if the player's in the idle animation. So if the player animation, and we're going to go by name. So if the player's animation and the animation we're looking for is idle, but what we want to do is we want to invert this. And we're going to say if it's not idle. If the animation isn't idle, then make sure that we are idling. And we're going to trigger this one time so we don't want it to continuously repeat. So as we enter the idle state, so actions, the very first one that we're doing is kind of the entering idle state. So we can add a comment here if we need to remember this. We can say entering idle state set animation to idle. So that's all we're doing. And so now we're saying if it's not idle, trigger this one time, and now set the animation. So now it's player, and then type animation by name, go to idle. So that happens immediately. Now we want to check certain variables. So we would start checking for keyboard and controller input. So we want to go to our game and add the extension game controller, install the project, and just like that, we have now the ability to check for controllers. And yeah, that's going to be it for now. What we're going to do is go to our global variables, and now we're going to start adding key bindings. So to make this game or whatever development you're working on have remappable keys, there's an extension for that, but I like doing it by hand. And I think that it's a great exercise for you to practice with global variables. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a variable, and we're going to make this a structure, and this is going to be key bindings. And we're going to add, and we're going to start adding in our key bindings. So we need keyboard up. There, we'll do it like that. Keyboard up. And we're going to do W for that for now. It needs to be lowercase. If you capitalize it as a string, the engine uses a lowercase to describe the W keyboard key. So it needs to be lowercase. So all these need to be lowercase. So we're going to go keyboard up, keyboard down, and that'll be S. And we're just going to move these around. Oh, no, I can't. These ones have to be in that order. That's right. We'll do keyboard left. And one more. Keyboard right. Now, controllers, now that we added the controllers to this method, controllers have a very specific way of being called. Just like how we were talking about with keyboard keys, right? If we want our player to move with WASD and jump with space, then this is how we do it. If we wanted the keyboard to be the arrow keys, it would be capitalization on the first letter of up. So U, capital U, and then P, and then left, same thing. So if I wanted to do left, it would be like this. Now on a gamepad, it's a little bit different. So we're going to add another variable, and we're going to name this gamepad up, and we're going to go through the same process again. So gameboard up, down, left, right. Now when we in our gamepad, what we have to do is we have to label these we have to set them as capitals in both cases. So caps lock to do these. So each of these have to be done in the right order. So up, or so left. This one's actually down, capitalization, right, and then up, like that. Okay. And now we have our keyboard map. Then we can start adding like the action button. So if we want to jump, that's one of the first things that we're going to add. We need to add a jump button. And we also need a keyboard jump button. So let's add both of those too. So you can always come back here as you need more buttons and add them in. So gamepad jump. And we're going to do let's call it the A button if we're dealing with like Xbox or something like that. So we're going to call A, remember capital, on controller, always capital. And then down here, we're going to do keyboard and jump. And we're going to do, for our jump key, of course, we're going to do space. And space is done. Space is done a little bit different because it is a action key. It needs to be with a capital, just like any of the enter, return, all of those buttons, right? Those are done with a capital first. So this one needs to be space. Like we were doing with the gamepad right or left, it needs to be capital first. So, all right. Excellent. So now we have the keys that we want to press to change our character's movement. Now what we need to do is start simulating these things, because the engine we assigned our player with the ability to move around already with the behavior that we installed. We're going to disable default controls. And we're going to tune this part up later as we start refining our game. But as we go into here, we need to now configure the controls. So when we're in idle, we need to consider our transitions, or our actions. So what can we do while we're in idle? We're going to say that we can jump, right? That's important. We want to be able to jump while we're just chilling. That doesn't need to be a child. I didn't mean to do that. So so keep them like this. And we can dash. So we don't have those finite state machines built yet, but we can check to see if our player has jumped. And unlike a state in this particular case, we're not going to transition when we jump. We're not going to transition out of our state. We're going to do that down in our transitions. So this is the action that we can do. So we want to, for jump, we have a jump, and then we have a jump transition. So this is the action of jump, and this is the transition to the state of jump. A little confusing, but I think that you'll see as we start building. So we're going to say if this isn't true. So if the button on our controller, and all of these, we're going to be using the text expression versions, and on the controller, we can say and this is a button, so the button pressed. So on the gamepad of 1, which is your first controller, and now we're going to use the expression. So this is in quotes now. As we move over, we can auto select and see all the buttons that we're capable of clicking on a controller. But instead, we already set a global variable for this, and we're going to map it. So now we're mapping that control. And to do that, we have to write global and variable. Now, a global variable is a number. So we need global variable string, because we're using, as you can see up here, text. See how these are in quotes? These are all saying that like click touchpad is a button. It is a string. And so we need to convert our gamepad information as a string, and it needs to be key bindings dot, and then what gamepad are we, we're going to be looking at the jump action. So jump, and we're going to close that because we have to pass through what we're trying to do, and say, okay. So at this case, it says if the button is pressed, well, we want it to be inverted. Now we could click the invert condition, but there's also a shortcut for this, and it's the J button. So if you press J, then this symbol is the inverse of. So whenever you see it, it means is not. So when the button is not being pressed for the keyboard for jump, and we're going to go into here, and instead of we copied and pasted it, but really I'll just actually add the condition player, or sorry, it's not a player thing, it's a keyboard. So we type in key, and we're going to use key pressed text expression. And on this one, we're going to do the same thing that we just did, global variable string, and we're going to pass through the key bindings dot, and then this is keyboard jump instead. And again, invert. And now we're saying if we're in if the player is in the idle state and none of these buttons are being pressed, then we're going to set our jump to 0. So we want to add a new player variable. So we're going to go to our player, and we're going to add a new variable, and we're going to call this one has jumped. Has jumped. Now we might want to do more jumps. And so for now, we're going to have a singular jump, so we can jump 1 time, and we're going to change that to a number, and it be 0. But now 0 means make sure we haven't jumped. So if we're resting in the idle state, now we need to go to our player, and they have a variable, and it's a number variable, has jumped is equal to 0. So we reset every time we go into the idle state. So if the jump button isn't being held down, we're not pressing it, then set it to 0. And we want to do the same thing for the dash. And so we're just going to copy jump, paste it, and delete dash, and call this one dash. And now we need to add the dash button to our globals. I should have done that earlier. And we're going to add the key binding to gamepad dash. What key do we want that to be? What's a convenient key on controller? We're going to call it B for now. Or maybe X? I think X would be easier to press than B to dash. So we'll do gamepad dash X. And for the PC, we'll do Q. Or E? Q, E, F? Maybe F key to dash. No, that'll be hard to press. Or shift? I think the dash key would make sense as shift, wouldn't it? Let's go keyboard dash. And we'll call this, oh, where'd it go? Keyboard dash capital on shift. And so we're going to just change jump on each of these to dash. You just kind of double click on it and it'll let you to just change that. And then we'll go back to our player variable, add has dashed number 0. So whenever we're not moving around on the game, we reset our dash. So we just got to go into an idle state. So now we work on transitions. So now that we have, this is what happens every time our player returns to the idle state. Oh, the idle state, excuse me. So now we have to transition out of the the states. So jump and run or move are going to be our main ones. So now we're going to start with moving. So in the transition, we want to check our ground events. So these are when we're on the ground. So idle, and we're going to call this ground events because we're going to copy and paste this a few more times around as we get to developing our game. And so basically now in our ground events in the idle transition, although we'll need to pass ground events into any time we're on the floor and between other states. So this will be easier for us to do. So we're going to just check to see if the player is on the floor, and it is on the floor. So it's a platformer object. If it's on the floor, now all of these are our ground events, things that we can do while we're touching the ground. So now we want to check to make sure, to see if any button is being pressed, right? So just like these, we're going to go into our move section. We can check the keyboard button. So we're just going to copy this one up here and paste it into our move section. We're going to click on it and press J. Oops. Over here, we're going to press J to unbind it, to set it to if it's true. So now we're going to check for if the gamepad... I just realized we're not going to need an up and down. I don't know why we built that earlier. Yeah, so down, we don't need down. I don't know. I got excited. We don't need down. Actually, we do need down. We do need down. We just don't need up. So the reason why we need down and not up is we can check to see if we're pressing down on our controller, and if that's the case, then we can actually like look downwards and like maybe move the camera or something like that. But we don't need gamepad up. We'll leave it just in case we want to add extra tooling, but we don't actually need it. So what we're going to do is check keyboard, and we're just checking to make sure that we're not moving left or right, right? And so what we want to do is check for if we are pressing left or we are pressing right, and we're going to add an or statement here. And we're going to do this for both keyboard, keyboard, joystick, and button mapping. So the D-pad will also work. So button pressing is a D-pad, and then there's also stick direction. So when we get into controllers, so keyboard left and right, and we're going to add an or condition here. So we're just going to type or. And then we also want a trigger once. So we only want this so when we're in the idle state and these buttons are being pressed, we want a condition to happen. We're going to change the player variable, and this is where we change the text variable of our player state to whatever we're doing. And so we're going to call this move. Okay, so now we're setting that transition. Now we want to add more key buttons. So we're going to copy our gamepad controller button. Now this would be the D-pad of our gamepad. So when we press gamepad left and we want to undo it so it's not in the false state, and we want to do this for right as well. And now one more thing that we need to do. So this is the D-pad on our controller and our keyboard button, but now we need to pass through the stick to make sure that we can also use the stick on the controller. So we want to go to stick, and we want to go force. So if the or actually, hold on, isn't there a, let's go controller, gamepad. There we go. If controller number 1 is pressed in the left direction, we want to move in the left direction. And if the stick is pushed in this would be the left stick is pushed in the right direction. Oops. We could do any, technically, but might as well verify very specifically left and right. So if left and right is being pressed, if any of these are being pressed, go to the run state, and it will immediately transfer out of the move state, out of idle, just like we did in how we transferred into this originally. Now we're going to transfer out of this into a move. So we'll have to then create the move controller, but we'll do that here in a second. But what we can do is add our jump for now. And so, and as well as dash. So we can take our dash, and it's much the same. So we're going to copy the move, everything from move, and paste it into here just for convenience sake. We're going to set this to jump, right? Because now we're transferring out of this, and then we just want to move this down into the bare minimum of what we're doing. So this is only a 2-key thing. No matter what, only 2 keys we ever press to jump. And so in our keyboard, we go to keyboard jump, and then on gamepad, we do gamepad jump. Pretty straightforward. But we need to add one variable, and we need to check if has jumped is 0. And so we're passing along this. So if player variable. So down here, we could say can jump. We're effectively doing the same thing. I like controlling it this way, but you could do can jump. But we might want to add more jumps to our character later, just like we do with dashes and stuff. So I like doing it with a variable. So variable, the number variable of has jumped is equal to 0. So if it is 0, we'll move it to the top, and you press any of these buttons, go to the jump state. Now we're going to test this. So we're going to go back to our game scene. We're going to go to our debugger events, and we're going to copy the event script, and we're going to call this, oh, I clicked on the wrong button. We're going to call this debug manager. So before we launch our scene, let's create a debug manager. Now that we have something to debug. And when we launch into our debug manager, we're going to set some here. So let's see, we're gonna go we'll go debug manager at the beginning of the scene. We could hide it like we do in the game events. That would be redundant. We don't need to do that, but we could move it here to keep it all in sync. And what I want to do is add something specific. So just to add, we'll do at beginning. We're going to be a little redundant here, and then we'll remove it. So at the beginning of the scene, we want to hide the debug group. So we can just copy this and move it over here. And then now we want when we're in the preview of, so we click on condition and we type preview, and this will only run when we're in the preview. So for our clients, they'll never, when we build the game, it checks very specifically if we're in our editor, and when we launch a preview this way. And so this will never be passed to any of the players. So what we want to do is go into here, and always we want to change our debug text now. So we're going to click on debug, click text, and now we want to write what we want to pass through. So we want to write the state, and we want to do state with a space, and we close it into our quotes because it's a string, and we're going to type player dot, and we're going to pass through a variable string. So it's player dot variable string, and it's player state is what we're passing through. And so now this will always display what our current state is at our player. And because it's on the UI layer, we don't need to adjust its position or anything like that. We're going to create a new child, and we don't need to be very specific for this. So we're going to do key pressed. So when the key is pressed, and we're going to call it numpad. So numpad, so our numlock numpad. And we're going to do it as the add symbol. So when we press add, what do we want to do? We want to show the debugger. So just click show. Debug group. And when we then press the subtract key, we want to hide, which is just one option above it. And we want to do each of these one time while true. We don't want this to continuously trigger. We just want it to trigger once. So now, here we go. When we launch our game now, our player's not going to move, but we can check to see if the player state moves. So we're going to launch this. And now we want to press the plus key, and we can see that we're in the move state because I'm silly. And I pressed it before. Hold on. Okay, I'm not going to touch any keys. We're going to add, so we're in the idle state. So our initializer is working, and now if I press jump, it goes to the jump state, but we can't move out of the jump state or the move state because we haven't defined what we can do in those states, right? This is how finite state machines work. It lets us have a very finite control over our player. So the arrow keys don't work, none of the numbered keys work. So now what we need to do is close this out and close down our debugger menu. So now we have that beautiful thing done. We can see that we're passing into these states, but we need to now build them, build the state. Going back to our player finite state machine, and all we have to do is inside of our move state is do this, copy this in, and now we're checking if we're in the move state. And if we are, change to finite state machine move. Create a new player finite state machine move, and drag that up just for organization purposes. We'll put all of our player scripts in order. We can add the debugger to the top. It doesn't really matter. But now we have a move state, and we'll go into our game state move. And this is where we kind of begin the magic of all that good, all the good stuff. So let's go into our hero finite state machine. Go into. All right. Okay. So now we want to do almost exactly what we did with idle, like all of it. So we're going to copy everything and we're going to paste it into here. And I'm going to show you how this works. So now I'm going to add a new event group down here, and we're going to start calling this now common events. So these are common events that happen between all of the transitions. We can jump once, so we can say jump. Well, we don't really need to define it that far because we might change it, but just common events is we can jump. So if we are set to this number, we're allowed, you know, if we're, these are all in the run state now, we can jump is what I meant to say. So now we can do our move state. So now we're going to change all of this. So we don't have an idle state yet in our player, another named animation called move. So now we're going to do that. So going back to our game, going to our move animation, we can just go down to run or whatever. It doesn't really matter, but export tile set to run. We're going to call this lore underscore run. So that'll build all 4 of those. We're going to go back into our main scene here. What are we doing? Where did I put it? There it is. So now we add our sprites and we add our 0 to 3 run. We are calling it move, whatever, doesn't really matter. And then now if we are in the, if we're not in the moves, set our animation to move. Cool. So now that when we enter this state, we have our the common events. Now, because we can jump, we can now start checking for, we can add Coyote time. We can add any other additional bits that we want to do. One of the things that we can do uniquely to in the move animation is actually handle movement. And so because we can move in this state, we need to check something. So it's actually very similar to the transition. We're going to copy. So because we're in the move state, we can't actually transition into move already. So even though we copy this over from idle, we're going to do something a little bit different where we're going to drag it up to the player movement, because now instead of changing the direction or what have you, we are going to now start simulating our key presses. So this is how we do this. Now we're going to stick with, we'll go left first. So we're going to delete everything that has to do with right. So delete right, delete right, delete right, or rather left. Delete every, yeah, there we go. And then what we want to do is check to see if in this one, we don't actually want to trigger once. That's another thing we don't want. We want this to be constant whenever we're pressing these buttons to constantly run the script. So what we can do is click on action and say simulate. So we click on our player and then we type simulate, and we're looking for key pressed. So when we're pressing a key, and we want to press the left key. So when we press the left key. We want to check to make sure, so to stop it. So sometimes what players will do is they'll press left and right at the same time by accident, and that causes your character to like jitter. So what we want to do as well is check the player's direction. So if the player's direction, if the player text variable, so text variable of direction is not equal to right. So this is just saying if we're not in the right direction, go left. And we can move that up. And we can add another, we want to add a subscript, and we want to trigger this once. Now, this is optional, but this is Well, because we add the text direction we're going to add that detection into the mechanics of our game. We want to keep that functionality moving forward. But there's another step that I want to add is I want to go to the player and we're going to add a behavior. Now, the behavior we don't currently have installed, but I believe that we need to eat we need to add it in our extensions, and we're going to call this 3D flip. It's one of my favorite simple rotation methods. It adds that Paper Mario paper flip, and because we have a white outline, I think it'll look really good to give us more of that paper quality. And so what we're going to do is now go to our player, since we added that behavior, and add a behavior to our player. And now we're going to add the 3D flip. You have to add the 3D flip to every object you want to do this. And it's a simple behavior. And so what we're going to do is minimize these things so it's clear. You just click on this arrow. And now in our move state, we're going to trigger this, and we're going to do two things. One, because we're going to the left, we want to flip our player. So we're going to flip to a side, and we're going to say yes. And we want to do that over how long? We'll do it about 120 milliseconds. So it'll flip pretty quickly. And now we want to set our player direction. So now we're going to go to our player, text, change the text variable of direction equal to left. Okay. And so now we're going to do the same thing for right. And we're going to say when it's not left, we want to simulate the right press. Let's double click and change that to right. And then down here for the left and right, so we're just going to change them all into right now. So if gamepad right, you could, click on it, double click on it, whatever you want to do there. However it works for you. And then we're going to say, no, we're not going to flip. And what this is actually going to do is send us back to the original side, our original side, right? And so now that we have the basic setup for this, what we want to do is add in a transfer. So in our movement, we're gonna do something a little bit different in our player movement, because we need to be able to move. So in this one, in our transition, we're gonna go to idle, and in our idle state, we're gonna kind of duplicate that our big original movement. I should have actually just moved that over, but let me copy this. And it's going to look different than what you are used to seeing. Oh, no, it worked out perfectly. No, that's not the right one. Okay. Whatever. So in idle, we're going to say, we can just grab the movement from here. There we go. So now in our idle, we're going to do the inverse of this. And so all we're going to say is if we got to switch all these over. If we're not touching any keys, and this needs to be outside of the if statement like that, this is a guaranteed none of these keys are being pressed. If none of these keys are being pressed and our player is on the floor, we don't want to switch to idle anywhere else. Oh, we need to click on our player, sorry. So we got to go to add condition player, and then we're just going to go to is on the floor. So if none of the keys are being pressed and we're on the floor, we're going to transition back to the idle state. Now, because we're also doing directional facing, we want to add in a little transition here as well. So we're going to duplicate this, and we're going to say that when the text direction is equal to, And we're going to say, well, because right is on top, we're going to say when it is right, or we're going to change this to left. We're going to do this in order. I rearranged a little bit just so I could see what I'm doing. We're going to copy the idle transition and we're going to move it up here into this section that we're changing, and we can delete everything else. And we're just going to trigger this one time. So we can actually just move it into here. We're going to delete the simulation and delete that. There we go. And this is not an if statement. This is a... So if the left direction is true and we're not pressing the left buttons, then transition to the idle state. We're going to copy this, move it underneath. We're going to duplicate it and then move it not as a child, but right underneath the right direction. And we're going to do the same thing and call this one when we are doing the right direction. And we're going to copy my brain. It's upside down. Just organizing here. Let me make sure that everything's in the right order. There we are. So let's see. If we're right, if we're not equal to right, if we're equal to left, if we're not equal to left, and if we equal right, there we go. Okay. To make sure I copy the right buttons. And again, if we're not being pressed, transition to the idle state. So now we should be able to move our player around. So let's go back, let's run our game. And now W makes us move. Right is not working right. I messed something up in that code. Let's take a look. I did something goofy here. So if one of these conditions is true, so if we're going left, and the text does not equal right, go right. Trigger, change the direction to left. And then we're changing to idle if that, so that makes sense. If any of the, if we're not facing left, simulate pressing right for the player. What happened? Let's go into our key bindings and make sure that was very strange. Gamepad right is right. B is right. Left is A. I'm not sure what happened there. Okay. I think we're having some clutter issue. Let's work on our collision shapes. Make sure our player's collision is good. And then let's edit the player's point and put the origin at his feet. There we go. Click OK. Let's try this again. I'm not sure if I was getting stuck on something. let's remove this for a second. Go down to our basic settings. Okay, why is right not working? Let's change this to simulate pressing. Oh, that's funny. All right, so we can bring all that back. I realized what happened. So down here, we have two gamepad right examples, and I must have done the same thing there. So this needs to be keyboard right, and the same thing on this gamepad right. It needs to be keyboard right. There we go. There we are. So now, did I just mess that up again? Back to the beginning. Why are you not moving to the right? Oh, dear Lord, Alex. All right. So, don't do what I'm doing. Be smarter than me. Okay? You have to bind the right button to the right direction. Okay. So, what I had done was I assigned the gamepad. Okay. I'm going to bring everything back again. We're just kind of troubleshooting to find out what I did wrong and how I could fix it. Yeah. Oh man. And now it switches back to gamepad right. All right. Can we function? Does our brain work? Alex, does your brain work? Let's try. Let's see what we're doing here. If the keyboard button is right, then you should be going to the right. I don't understand. Oh, I do understand why. Because in the directions, we're checking for. Let me see if that's true, actually. I'm gonna cry big alligator tears. Uh, okay, we'll just deal with the most fundamental version. There we are. Jeez, I see what's happening. I mucked all of that up. I was transitioning via capital letters, I think, on the right and left, the directions. I'm just not even gonna fuss with that right now. We'll get that done later. So now, when none of the buttons are being pressed, we should be going into idle. Okay, but we're not, but our animation isn't changing. So let's go back to idle. It's probably because they're not on loops. There we go. So we need to make sure that our animations are set to loops. We're just going to rebuild that. There we go. And now we should go back to our animation. There we go. So now we have our left and right animation. And our movement up should not be jump. That should not happen. Okay, good. All right. So there we go. So now we have our movement and we have our animation for it. He is really fast. We're going to change that. So now we can go into our player and start refining those platformers. The gravity 1000, jump speed 600. That is insane. We're going to go to 200. The falling speed of... Actually, that was kind of fine. Ladder climbing speed. We're not going to deal with ladders right now. We're not going to grab any of that. I'm going to try this. There we go. Much better. Oh, I broke him because I pressed jump. Okay. So now let's add the jump. So jump. We're going to transition into jump. And then we'll start doing some polish on how jump works. So we're going to get into our idle and our move. Let's see here. So jump. So in our state, we check, okay, we can only jump one time. So if it isn't, when we stop jumping, set it back to 0, and then add our jump. Where are we at? Add our jump. We want to start checking. So if we are at 0 in our transition state, and we press these keys, and more importantly, we can only jump when we're on the floor. So we currently cannot double jump or anything like that. So we're going to check if our player is on the floor. So player is on the floor. And if that is the case, make sure it's not in the or example. It needs to be here always. If we're on the floor, set ourselves to jump. That's all we got to do. Now, we are not going to add Coyote time yet, but we will eventually. And then if we enter a jump state, we need to then enter a fall state. So we can jump. And then as we fall, we're going to paste this. And now we're going to check for the same thing, kind of. We're going to say if... We don't even need to check for another jump. We're just going to check if the player is falling, I believe is actually a pre-built-in, yep. So if the player is falling, then set the player to fall. Easy. So now that we've kind of have these basic things built up, we can very easily replicate them across every script, because in a finite state machine, again, every player state is kind of its own self-contained functioning code. We get to control what the player is doing in those states very specifically, hence finite, very fine control. So now we go back to our player finite state machine, and then we add in jump and fall. So, all right, jump. Let's do jump first. So just like everything else, we're going to create we're just going to copy the scripts. We're going to do this twice, put one into falling and put one into jump. So if we're now jump, player finite machine, you guessed it, jump. And instead of moving, we're going to go fall. I need to put that in quotes. And to change this to fall. So we then have to do our event scripts. It's a little monotonous, but once you set it up, it's glorious. I promise. I promise. It's worth doing. It helps if you keep the same name conventions. Player, finite state machine, jump. All right. Doesn't matter what order they're in. Whatever you want to do. So same thing. Always set it to the game scene because that's the scene that we're controlling everything in. Self-explanatory. And now we need to control the jump. So what happens in jump? So again, we have two major states. This one's kind of small, so we're going to build it by hand without copying everything over, or it will become a mess. So we have our actions, and we have our transitions. Yay! In our actions, the first thing we always want to do is do this one time. Just like an idle, if we're not in the idle animation, if we're not in the jump or move animation, set it to those things. So now we need to add them. So the jump animation. We're going to export animation jump, and we're going to call it lore jump. I don't really have a fall frame for him yet, so we're just going to take one of our other frames and use it as a placeholder. And right now he doesn't have his hands in the jump, so it's kind of janky, but that's fine. We can re-import later. And so we're going to go back to our player, and now that we know we need a jump and fall, we can add it. So jump, fall. In the jump, we want to add the player sprite for the jumps. So jump. And we don't want this one to loop, because when he jumps up, we want it to stop on the last frame. Okay? And so if we loop it, it'll continuously go like the idle and the other one, but this one will simply just go to the end. And then for fall, we're going to take another sprite. We're going to take the jump 0 as our fall, because he has no hands and he just looks basic. So that'll work. And now, if we're not in the jump state, then, or the jump animation, then we're going to change our animation by name to jump. Then we're going to change that value of the player. So the player's number variable, and we're going to check has jump, and we're going to set it to 1. So now, as we enter the state, we're going to jump. So then what do we need to do every time we go into the jump state? We need to jump. So we're going to trigger. Sorry, this is my brain is failing me right now. We need to simulate a up press, or in this case, a jump press. Sorry. So we're going to simulate the jump. Now, we want while we're in the air, we want to be able to move. If we don't add some movement script, we won't be able to move. So we're going to go into our move, and we're going to copy the player movement, and we're going to paste it into the actions. This is what you can do, remember, while you're in the state. So we can move. So as we're falling, yeah, it's that simple. And then we want to transition into 2 event groups. This one is idle, and the other one is fall. So in the jump script, we just want to validate. This is kind of double redundancy, but this is where we start copying the transitions, right? So jump, or in this case, this is fall. So when our player is falling, go into the fall state. And we want to just make sure that that only happens when we're done with our animation. Actually, it doesn't really matter, I don't think. We'll check if the animation is jump. So making sure, double validating that our player has jumped. So this is for falling. I was going to build one for idle. No, yeah, this is fine. So if the player's animation is jump and the animation is finished, so we're just gonna go animation is finished, and the player is falling. Switch over to fall. Now, if we wanted it for idle, we could paste the same exact thing. I don't know that we'd ever need to go to the from the jump animation. We should only ever transition into the fall state, but just in case something weird happens, we're gonna check and just say, hey, listen, if you're on, instead of falling, if you're on the floor and you were in the jump state, so if you're on the floor, same conditions, move to idle. I don't think it really matters. So it's just a trigger state. So now we should be able to move and jump. Oh, that is the saddest jump. That's the saddest jump I've ever seen. We got to fix that. What the heck? Jump speed. We'll do, I guess we're going to do 600. Seems a bit high. That is, oh. And there we go. We're stuck. Oh, because we're stuck in the fall state. You're a genius, Alex. Because now you jump so high that you do enter the fall state. Okay. So now we need to go into very quickly, go into our fall state. Idle, we don't need that. Move, we don't need that. And then we don't need the initializer. We need fall. This one should be very straightforward. I don't think we're going to need much for this. Let me think. Because right now in our falling script, we all right. So here we go again. With this one's pretty straightforward as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to, just because this is pretty small, we're going to duplicate this to actions and do transitions. Inside of the transition of action, we want you to be able to jump one time. So we're actually going to go back to our idle state and we're going to copy the jump. And so if you're falling, say you jump, if you walk off of a ledge, you will then go into the falling state. And if you haven't jumped, we want to make sure that you can jump. So we need to add the jump back to our actions. If none of the buttons are being pressed, No, this wouldn't need to be here. I'm just thinking about it. And can only jump once. That would be a transition. I'm thinking about it in a weird way. We don't need that. Sorry. Not that I'm aware of right now. So what we do need, though, actually, is the player fall. And we can just copy that straight over. So this will allow us to fall in our scene and control our movement. And we want to add at the top a condition to trigger one time while being true. And then we want to simulate we need to set the animation again every time. And that just guarantees that we are in the proper animation frame when we enter the state. And now all we want to do is check in our transition, just like we did for our jump. Once we hit the floor, we want to transition back to the idle state. And that's all we can do in falling. So we're just going to go to fall and transition into idle. Now, here is where we can take that jump script, and if if where's it at? I believe it's an idle. There it is. This is the one we want. So going into our fall and add this in here. If we're at 0, if we haven't jumped, jump. This allows us to do air jumping. So if we're falling and we haven't jumped yet, allow us to jump. Now we could set that at a timer, so that way we can transition in our actual jump state with Coyote time. But right now we don't have Coyote time, so we're just gonna function off of this. If we haven't jumped, then jump. So now we can. Hello, you're on the floor. Oh, there we go. We just need to set it to make sure that our player is in the fall animation. There we go. That jump is insanely high, so we're going to drop that down a little bit farther. Maybe we'll do 400. I have a good feeling about 425. I don't know why. Nope, I lied. Still not high enough. This player is going to die a terrible death unless we can figure out the right jump. Let's make sure that we get this just right. There we go. All right, that's better. Woo! We're actually going to get rid of that jump. And I think we're going to manually add in Coyote time. And that'll just be in our jump script. So let's see here. Actually, Coyote time would end up being in our ability to move. It'd be in our run script. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to go back to our player's move script. And it seems weird that we wouldn't add Coyote timing into our jump, but the reality is we're only Coyote timing when we're moving, right? So if we're running and we fall off the map, then we want to begin our Coyote time our Coyote timer. Now I know that there's extensions for platform. I haven't actually played with any of the advanced platformer mechanics. Oh. Well, there's quite a bit in this extension. So let's add this extension and use it. I haven't actually used it before, so we'll be looking at this at the same time. But I do know that Coyote time needs to be in our common events. So, or right outside of our common events. So this is specific to this. So let's pull this out by 1, keep it underneath actions, add a new event. We're going to call it Coyote timer. Coyote. All right. So let's check out this. Do I need to add it to the player? Probably. Object, this, crunch that in, add behavior, platform. Coyote time and air jump. Number of jumps. Huh. Interesting. Oh, that was way faster than I was anticipating. Okay. Don't mind me. I forgot to simulate the jump. It's so funny to me. I don't worry about it. There we go. And oh, it auto, yeah, right. Okay. So now we need to check. So we have an auto coyote jump, which is fine, but this shows you the tolerance that how far we can jump out, and that's pretty good. I like that. Like it's like a quarter second delay. You can really get moving. So let's so now we're gonna go into our jump action. This is jump reset. Now in our jump actions transition, in our jump, if we can coyote time. Hey, what's up, Gaston? So if we can jump and we haven't jumped, go to the jump. Now we just added coyote time into our game with like one line of code. Okay, I think. Am I not fast enough? I think I did it backwards. Can you link Pygame and Tile together? I have no idea. I don't know what the heck. No, okay. It should be this. If the player can coyote jump, we're just going to set this twice. We're okay. So we have a regular jump, and then we're going to have a coyote jump. So if our player can coyote jump, and any of these keys are pressed, and we trigger that one time, and we're also no, that's fine. There we go. That should have fixed the issue. Is my regular jump working? Yeah, it is. Okay. No, it did. It did work. It did work. I'm like 100%. I'm pretty sure that worked. Uh. Yeah. Actually, I don't want to transition into jump. Actually, I realized that we need a simulator jump here because we don't really want to leave the jump state. Does that make sense? We just want to force it to jump. Because then we can keep our momentum. I'm not very good with Coyote jumps. I need to increase the time. We're going to do half a second. Am I bad at jumping? What is going on? Yeah. Okay. I just want to see if this is still jumping as it should be. Nope. Oh, because we're checking if the player's on the floor. Alex. All right. There we are. Okay, when we jump, we're not able to move. Why is this? Because I accidentally plugged... You gotta be really careful you don't do what I just did. You gotta be careful how you're putting in your movement and stuff. But a big part of what was killing me was that I couldn't move while I was in the air. But now we can. And so now we can Coyote jump off the edge. That's a lot of tolerance. Oh, oops. I want to find how close, like how, half a second, huh? That's like mad delay. Yeah, you can really jump. Let's, yeah, whatever. We'll keep it. Who knows? That might end up being good. Okay. So. All right. All right. Let's see. I guess dashing is what's important next, I suppose. Let's add another collision so that I can jump to it and hopefully dash as well. We're going to add a couple more obstacles in our game path. Okay. So if we jump, we die. That's good. It's good to know. It's good to know. So now we can let's work on that dash. So idle. Idle's the first place that we're gonna want to do that dash. Dash. Move. If another business being placed has jumped. Dash has dashed. Has dashed set to 0. There we go. This doesn't need to be in here. It makes no sense. Yeah. Let's see here. Move. We can move, and then we can transition out. And ground events. All right, we're going to want this to be dash. So it's very similar to the jump. I'm going to set it to dash if the keyboard action key of keyboard, the dash keyboard key is pressed, or the gamepad dash button is down, and we're on the floor. Dash. And we don't need to be on the floor. We can dash while we're in the air. Or moving. Sorry, this is on the floor. So this is, yeah, that's important. So this is when we're moving. And then we want to add this transition into everything that we can, where we can dash. So we can dash in the jump script. So transition, we'll add dash as a transition. Come on, add dash. Thank you. And then we also need to add that into idle. And so we have actions, so we can reset our jumps and our dashes when we're not jumping. And in a transition, when we're on the floor, we can dash. And then for jump specifically, dash doesn't need to be on the floor. Everything else, it needs to be on the floor. So now we just need to add the dash function. So if we can, or as we set the dash, we're going to go into the player finite. Come on, Alex. We're going to add the player finite state machine for dash. So player finite state machine dash. And in that, now we can go back to where we were, finite state machine, change this from fall to dash. And now we can delete that guy. Go into here, go into game scene, dash. So this one's interesting because I'm not sure. So I haven't ever used the pre-coded dash. So we're going to do this together, but we're going to do our actions and we're going to do our transitions. And in our actions, if we are not in the dash animation, go to dash, but we don't have that yet. And so the next, we don't have an animation for it, so we're going to skip that part, and we're going to add another group element, and we're going to call this dash. I mean, this is what we do, right? So as we enter the state, we want to check dash. Player can't dash? Okay. Oh, we need to add the dashing to our player object. So, just like we did with the advanced jump, we now need to add a new behavior, and I believe it's dash. Dive dash? Horizontal dash. The cooldown, the deceleration, the dash gravity. That's pretty intense. I'm going to have to take a look at this to get the configuration right. But back in our dash script, whenever the we've already pressed the button to dash, so the player simulate a dash key for the player. And then the transitions, we need to pull from probably, we'll pull these from the jump script. And so we can fall and we can return to idle. That's all we can do in this. So, and we're going to change it from this. We're just going to remove the animation requirements. So if I'm falling, great. If I'm on the floor, return. We can't dash and jump. Not yet, anyways. So we're just going to do that. Open this up. That didn't work at all. Hold on. Oh, sticky keyed me. Sticky keyed myself. Okay, Alex, from idle. Did we not add it to the idle? I thought we did. Dash. If the dash key is pressed, is that not how we do? Is it not shift? Is it capitals? Maybe it's capitals. Is there a default dash key? Oh no, we need the animation. I see. I see. I see. Let's get rid of the idle for a second and go into is falling. No, okay, that still doesn't work. It must not be. I'm curious what the global key is. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna check it real fast and go to simulate key, simulate key press, down key press. Wait, simulate, no, simulate text. Where's the text one? Text. Key? Oh, it's right. Okay. I'm in the wrong section. I'm right? I'm in the wrong section. That's why. If the key is pressed, what is it? Oh, it's probably left shift. Yeah. All right. So all we need to do though is go into our global variable, and in shift it is L and then shift. LS, capital L, capital S, LS shift. Right. It worked. All right. And so we're now when we idle, we're just going to make sure that we're on the floor, we're not dashing, and then we can return. Oh, and actually I think we're still in the dash state, huh? Why? What? I understand. I get what's going on. I got to simulate the dash key one time. So usually we would have and yeah, it's fine. That was on me. Oh, that dash is interesting. You can really go with that dash, I'll tell you what. Whoa, I fell. We're going to decrease that speed, definitely. That is way too fast. And we can add some pretty cool effects. That is a huge dash. Uh-oh. Is falling and isn't dashing. All right. Now we need to do that trigger. So this is where, just like jumping, where we need to change the jump variable and then trigger what we're doing. So we need to change dash and then change the has dash to 1. And then as we leave and go back into our idle state, we'll be able to not dash anymore. Yeah, there we go. So then in our idle state, when our player is idle, we should have our dash when we're not pressing the dash key to has dashed to 0. That dash is insane. All right, so let's work on that dash a little bit. Dash gravity. Do we really want gravity? I don't think we do. That's so much force without gravity. Because when we dash right, we want it to be as direct as we can get it. So let's sustain speed, go 400, initial speed 400. So we're gonna start. You don't have a choice. This thing's gonna shoot you. Well, there it goes. All right, cool. So that should give us a nice little movement for. Try that again. I need a reset key. I should add that. So what we're gonna do is go back to our debugger menu because we already have one of these while in preview, and this really is kind of a debugger sort of thing. We're just gonna add keys that allow us to reset the game. So what we're gonna do is when we click the we're just gonna click the R key. So when the R key is pressed, we're going to reload the game scene. So game scene load. What's the transition? Oh, change the scene. And we're going to change it back to game scene. I think that will work. I don't think that there's a reset. You just reload. Yeah, you just reload. Cool. So now if yeah, there we go. And then we could add some game juice to our characters, so we can add like ripples behind our character, right? We can't dash while we fall, so we're going to change that real quick. So we're going to go back into our move. While we're falling, Coyote time matters, actually, right? So if we can jump, let's go back to our fall script. After our player movement, if we can jump, we should be able to jump while we're falling. Actually, no, Coyote time doesn't matter because we don't have air jumps. Never mind. Forget that. Don't pay attention to that. Scrap it. We want to be able to dash though. So in our jump, we want to be able to dash. So transition dash, we just go to our fall, transition, dash, make sure it's in transitions. Good to go. So now while we're falling, we can also dash. Whee! But did that work? Was I not paying attention? Maybe I fell so fast that I couldn't. If the what dash jump dash, where's jump? Where's the jump script? What happened? In fall, we can move. And then we can dash. Why is my dash not working? I guess we can check to make sure he's not on the floor, but that shouldn't matter at all. Can I dash? Wait, is that working? Can I dash again after I stop? Yeah. We'll go to the fall state and we'll set that if the player is falling, I guess. So if the player is falling and we haven't dashed, allow ourselves to dash. I don't know why that would be necessary, but that didn't work either. Well, I died in the idle script. How'd that happen? That should never have happened. Oh, it's because we're moving. Yeah. We just need to add the dash to the movement as well. And we want to be able to dash no matter when we're moving. So originally we did it, we checked to see if the dash was on the floor. And actually what we can do is just remove that and move it up. Just like we did with our jump. And that should allow us to be able to, there we go. Yeah. So what was happening is we was changing us to the move direction when we were moving. And this is why finite state machines is really easy to troubleshoot, because you can be like, oh, where was my last, like, what was the state I was in when I broke my game? So, it's something you may think it's nice to just keep your state checker always on, but now we have a nice little dash. We can jump and dash. We can fall and dash, and then we can reset our game. So that's like the basics of the platforming system. So we have like all of our conditions almost in. The only other thing that I want to do is be able to wall climb. And I'm going to cover that in another video. I think today that's about it. I think what I'm going to do is work on the tile set a little bit more so that we have all of our animations and everything for our next video. And then I'm going to edit and turn this into a bite-sized, bit-by-bit sort of tutorial. Because right now we're at 2 hours, and I'm going to have to decide what's important. And then edit to make sure that oh, cool, Extel, I'm glad that you learned a lot. I have a feeling, do you use finite state machines, or? I know that I've been really quiet and just kind of like teaching and stuff, but now I'm opening the floor, I guess. I don't have to end the stream, but I'm just kind of like dilly-daddling around now. So feel free to chat me up, ask me questions. I'm going to be right back. I'm going to use the restroom, and then we'll go more. I'll probably just do some art on stream. Ah, yes. Okay, just got back and I was reading what you said. Yeah, so yes, you got a little bit of spaghetti code going on. No, that makes sense. You should only be changing what you need as you need it. But to make enemy states, it's the same way. I have enemies in my game, and I think so. What I'm gonna do, Xtel, just so you know, is I'm gonna make this series as a basic platformer, and then I'm going to take the same tile set and sprite and then and can make another series when we're done with the basics of a platformer and then move it into a Metroidvania. So I will be covering how to do all of that in the next few weeks. Especially if you watch along in the live streams, like this week or the next week, you'll be able to like watch me do that whole process. I think what I want to do is add game juice with particles. Nice. You were prototyping. Yeah, no, and that makes sense. I mean, most times, I mean, you're talking about boilerplate code, right? Like everything we did today is really boilerplate. It's traditional. I mean, it's yeah, okay, it's got my sprite in it, but honestly, beyond that, it's just basic platformer code. And so you probably went from basic platformer code into developing your game, and now it's all organized and stuff. But branching off and using event sheets is a really good way to keep organized and keep track of what's going on. So, um, I'm thinking about some game juice ideas while I'm just sitting here. Whoa! Okay, I think what I want to do is yeah, is go about adding that like ripple effect on the player. Also, I said earlier, like we were going to move the player to a white outline system. So what I want to do is create a new layer underneath the base layer and call it player. Actually, we want it above the base layer. And we're going to add in that, we're going to go to our effects in the player layer. And we're going to change from hemisphere light. We don't want that at all. We're going to delete that. And we're going to create a outline effect. We're going to give it a thickness of 1 and give it a white outline and move our player to that scene. And now when we play our game, we should see a white outline. And honestly, I will be making it into a template that so normally so live stream is so that I can make those videos, and then I'm actually going to be building a complete template, and when it's all done and polished and put that on the marketplace, and then I'm going to be selling my sprite set and everything from this video. If you'd like to, you can pause it and go along, but because you're in Discord, I don't mind sharing with you. We could do that off stream if you want to see that, so you don't have to go all the way back, um, or pause the video, whatever works for you. I don't mind. Maybe I will compile it as it currently is, and I'll add a section on Discord. Actually, be in the work share. I don't mind sharing the template as it is now because it's boilerplate template code. So I'll just replace the player with a blue block and send off the code. Yeah, not a problem. Actually, no problem at all. Yeah, no problem. Let's add some particle effects. I'm wondering, maybe particles? I'm thinking if we make a particle effect and then make the particle the player, so we skip this, the particle is going to be an image. We're going to make it the player idle image. we're going to set the particle's width to 1 and 1. I don't think... Maximum number of particles is 3. Particles a second, 3. The spray cone in degrees is 0 degrees. The radius of the emitter is... I'm not sure how this is going to work. So what I'm going to do is just create the particle as is. We're not going to change anything. Yeah, no, that's not going to work. I believe, now that I'm thinking about it, I can't remember. Like, sometimes my brain can only hold on to so much. So let's go to the shop, or the build. Let's open up our browser, and I think that there's a whole... Actually, I think it's on YouTube, now that I'm thinking about it. Let me pull it up, because I think Helper Wesley talks about this in the actual Gdevelop. I'm just going to pull this out this way and go to YouTube real quick. And then we're going to go to Gdevelop, Tweens. I think it's Tweens. Squash and Stress, no. Maybe it's a Game Juice. It actually might be in the learning section now that I'm thinking about it. Getting started. Simple menus. Is it an extension? Let's go see all. So that's the effect that I want on the player. But I don't think it's actually in this section. I'm going to move this over.
Hi, Max here. In this video, we'll go...
No, this is too tutorially. That's not what I'm looking for. I wonder if it's on Helper Wesley's channel. I thought it was in here, but I'm just gonna have to go to the Gdevelop YouTube channel. Particles. Thanks, Wesley. You're super handy, my guy.
Here we can change the name.
Wait, what? That's not the one I even clicked on. YouTube, you betray me. Let me go check I'm also curious if there is a dash No, I thought maybe somebody would have created an easier particle thing here, but we're going to configure this. All right. So I just need to play with the particle emitter. So basically what we need to do is we're going to do 3 particles by 1. We're going to do we do 300. It doesn't really matter. -1, 2. Force applied -85. Negative. I guess no. We'll just keep it moving in the right direction. So we'll do 5. We'll do it 360. So it sprays backwards. The radius is 0. There's no gravity on these particles. We want to delete the particles when they're done. We don't want any rotation speed. Let's try this again. Whoa, why are you flying out the wrong... What? Not quite right. not quite right. Oh, we'll do that. 0. I see. That was on me. So what we need to do now is flip this around. So it's backwards. That's going to create the particle. What have I done? 1 degree, I guess. Excellent. I'm just upside down. So let's flip this back. The angle in degrees is 45. Oh, easy enough. No, I know what to do. I know what to do. Okay. That was weird. I had a brain fart. What we're gonna do is set the spray cone to 1. So what we'll end up doing is creating creating this so it's facing the opposite way of the player. So all we have to do is flip it horizontally. So when the player is facing right, flip it left. And that's something that we can just do in our game scene. So we can go into our camera settings and instead we'll create a new one and call it particle. Particle, I think, manager. Did I spell that right? I have no idea. And we're going to create a new event. We're just going to include the events from here and we're going to call it particle manager. Create a new one. And we're going to do it in the game scene. And so very, very straightforwardly, so we're going to do this once while true. So for both ones, so if the player is flipped, so if the player is flipped, then the particle emitter needs to, let's see, always we need to set the particle emitter position. We're going to center the position on player dot point x center and set the y position to the same. And then, so that'll always happen. And we want to stop the emitter. End start opacity, stop emissions. So at the very beginning, always stop the emission, change its position. And then if the player is flipped, then what? Can I not flip this? Why? I guess we're going to add a 3 flip to it, I suppose. Oh, it's incompatible. So I guess you can't flip particles. Well, what the heck are we going to do? Because if I set it to 360, it's going to shoot behind me, right? Maybe not. When the player is flipped, change the angle of the spray cone to negative 180, or in this case 360. Or in this, actually, we want it to be 180. Actually, 0 degrees. I'm not sure which direction. It stopped before it ever began. That's correct, because I told it not to. We want to do this, change this at the beginning of the scene, stop the emission, so that way, before it ever begins, before the player sees it, it should not have that. Yeah, okay. There we go. And then in the particle manager, change its position, change the angle of the spray, and change this to negative 180. So when the player is not flipped, I want to say, we'll see if that works. So then what we want to do is create that, show that particle emission when we dash. So in the dash state, now when we are dashing, simulate the dash and start the particle emission. if we're lucky. That should work. And then, of course, when we enter this state, we're going to have to disable it. But for now, that didn't work at all. Oh, we need to restart. We need to start it as well. Like, we'll have to... Oh, the emission angle. Change the emission angle to 0 and the emission spray angle, to negative 180. Get back to our game scene. I don't usually use particles. An infinite number of particles in the tank. So that should start it. Why the heck? Oh. We had it there for a second. What happened? There we go. I don't know how that got changed to 3. Are we having an issue? What is your conundrum? What? What is going on? Alright. What the heck? Is there supposed to be an infinite number of particles? Didn't I just tell you? Particles in the tank. Infinite. 10. What is your conundrum? Facing the wrong way. Okay. I have to think about this. So if we put it behind the player, right? So if we put the art, what if we move it in the opposite direction? So we start this particle out here and we move backwards. So let's not change the angle. And let's just work off the player for half a tick. Oh, that didn't work at all. Wait. Hmm? So we're moving it to the player's position. And we're flopping it around, which we don't want to do anymore. So now we're going to put it to the player's X position center minus 32. So now it should be spawning them behind me. They're just moving the wrong way. And then when I flip around, so now, okay. So when the player is flipped, set it to positive 32. And when it's not flipped, set it to negative 32. Hello, sir. Sir? I haven't changed anything. What? Oh, we just want to change those once conditions. Okay. So now when we turn around, we now want to change the angle of that. So now we go to particle emissions. We set the emission angle to negative 180. And I believe... nope. That's not right. It's facing the right way, but it's upside down. And we can't flip it. Okay, what if I do 360? Will it do the same thing? It should be the same thing, but is it? I don't know. Gentlemen. Because I didn't know that that was an extension. Reborn? That would be nice. I was wondering what it was called. I thought I was like, for sure there should... Oh. Right. All right. Jeez. Do I need to add a shadow clone here? No? Is it not how that works? Okay. It must just be like a particle emitter thing. Let's figure this out. So, into the dash. Whilst we're dashing, Okay, so I need to make a clone. Okay. All right. All right. Interesting. Okay, we're going to duplicate the player and call it Shadow Clone Jutsu. I'm going to call it a Shadow Clone. And I guess we'll just... This will be fine. We'll use some tinting and some other stuff to change the color, or I'll just create a custom particle for that. So animate those, fading the opacity of the clones by 140 per clone. Oh, we'll start on. We'll check the default values. Interesting. Okay. Um. Whoa! Oh, right. We need to then follow the player. Interesting. Increase that just a widge. Am I doing that wrong? I don't understand. What? All right. So we need to move that into the uh, dash state. Yeah, that makes sense. I was thinking about that. I was like, all we need to do is check the dash. The player is dashing. I'm trying to figure out how the script was constructed. so I could figure out how to operate it, but that is not. Whoa, that looks like garbage. All right. So, turn the opacity of each clone by 650 by 50. Hey, that almost looked right. Wait, what? They're not going to have. Well, they're being built on the default layer, and the player's on a different layer. So I would just need to move them layers if I wanted them to keep the player's white outline. But what I'm going to be doing is changing the actual sprite to like a blue sprite or something, you know? Pew! Pew! I kind of like the shadow clone. That's actually really. I'm not gonna lie, that's pretty cool. A game. I kind of want to do that for all of the like even the jump. Do one vertically for the jump. That'd be pretty interesting because it shows like force, right? Like boost and gives a sense of moving a little bit faster. Um, but what we can do is set its position. The Z position or the layer. Wait, I don't remember what the layer is called. Layer? Yeah. We probably need to do this for each of them. Nope, that works. I see it. It works. Okay. I don't want to do that when I jump. We're just gonna, yeah, do this. Go back to our jump, and in our transitions, just delete what we already got. Blug! But I keep smacking my forehead on that thing. So we're gonna have to jump. I could have just. I keep forgetting I have R to press now. My bad. Ugh. So this is really interesting, right? So we're finding out that our player's jump is too high for the what we're doing, or also, well, yeah, no, just that basically. Oh, there we go. Okay, so that is our jump. That's pretty nuts. So let's add another a platform over here, so we can like jump to it and try to get around. But all right, so we need to work on that dash a little bit. So the dash, as we're dashing, we're sustaining for like too long, I think. That seems about better. So okay, so yeah, our how long it's dashing for. There we go. Oh. Holy cow. All right. All right, let's take a look at all of our stuff here. We'll dash out at 500, and then we'll sustain ourselves at 400, and then we'll move up to 500, and we'll sustain ourselves for 0.125. Our gravity, our jump speed could be 450. The fall seems reasonable. Maybe we can fall a little bit slower. That might help. Arbitrary numbers that we're playing with here. Okay. What that? All right. Good. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, yeah. Ah, ah. Ah. Okay. So the sustain. So sustaining is, I think, when we hold, as we're holding our dash. Okay, we're gonna like slow down as we sustain in our dash, just a little bit. So there should be a What? I'm gonna mess around with this just a little bit so I can see what the heck is going on. I've never used this tool before. Okay. Uh-huh. Now that we have the initial dash, maintain for 0.5 seconds. Maximum maintain is 1 second. Let's see if that helps any. One without, that doesn't seem to have helped at all. Seems like this weird fart. Like it's just like this weird gust that you don't really. Okay, so it doesn't seem like I don't understand the sustained part. Okay, we're gonna set this to 1,000, and we're gonna increment it at 200. The minimum sustained duration, the maximum. Hmm. That doesn't seem to have changed anything. We're gonna get a little bit faster with our jump. Okay, we're gonna work on our jump a little bit. We're gonna do we're gonna do the same basic thing with our jump, and we're gonna sustain our jump for up to half of a second, and we're gonna lower our jump speed, I think, to back to 425. And so we can, if we hold it, we'll jump higher, and then we can also do a little. So we'll be able. We're gonna hold our jump for a minimum of 1 second. Okay, gravity jump speed is 600. The sustain is up to better height. Hmm. Sorry, I was reading something on. Whoa. Whoa. Ah! Am I missing something? We'll do 700 on this, 400 on the jump speed. So we're going to fall faster than we jump. But I don't feel like that's... Why is that not working? It doesn't feel like it's working. I think it has to do with the way that I'm rendering the jump script. Because as soon as we come out of as soon as I press jump, we're jumping our maximum height. Reborn, are you here? You're like my problem solver, dude. Whenever I run into an issue like this, you always fix my problem. You want to fix my problem? Okay, for one, close that. Two, move that platform behavior up, please. Can I move it up? I thought I could move these up. How do I move this up? Guess not. Okay, whatever. Why is he jumping so small? That's really interesting to me. 400.5, sustained jump 0.5 of a second. Well, so with the way that the finite state machine is working as it currently is, everything needs to happen in its own jump state. Oh, that would be the same because of this scenario. Interesting. Do I still need to do that even when I transfer into because we're going into the jump state. This is currently being pressed, so we're going into the jump state, and then once we're in the jump state, do we need to check that again? That seems weird. I guess because we are passing through into the jump state, so we need to check if it is pressed. No, that doesn't work either. Because I'd have to press it again, which wouldn't work. So then this is the same thing. So if the jump key is being pressed, then we're already jumping. What? From what? My dash script? We triggered dashing once. I don't. Oh, I see what you mean. Oh. That's funny. You're right. Dude, I'm so tired. This is what happens. You program for fucking hours, and then your brain turns to literal mush. This is where I like to remind everybody to take breaks. Get a drink of water. Okay? Listen. Don't be like me. Thanks, Reborn, for fixing my brain. And that we would then change the same thing if we wanted the sustain to work on the dash. I understand now how that works. But I don't want dash. I want dash to be a one-time thing. I don't want it to be sustained. So that works. Now we can just up the dash speed just a smidge. All right. All right, we're our jump is way too long sustained. You can leap miles. We don't want that to happen. So once we jump, a quarter of a second seems appropriate enough. Oh, Coyote time saved me at that fall rate. That was nuts. All right, so now we can do wall slides, wall climbs, and all of that. And I'm going to save that one for the next episode. So thank you guys so much for joining me this time. Reborn, you're a genius. Thank you for helping me fine-tune that little bit. I'll be cutting these up into small episodes. And then also we're going to be in the next stream. So maybe even tomorrow. I might stream tomorrow. So this is perfect. No, Xtel, this is perfect timing. You're leaving from work. I'm leaving from work. Same thing. All right, guys. Thank you so much for all the help, and I'll see you guys next time.